gay? You probably don't know me. What can I do?
There's no bullying here. Stay quiet and stand still.
What will you do, bold bitch?
The courtroom was silent, too silent. Judge Judy had just lifted her gavel when the back doors burst open. A man in full military dress uniform stepped inside, medals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. 4 stars on each shoulder, a symbol of power that made even the gallery instinctively rise. No. One had called him. No one expected him. No. One knew why the most powerful military figure in the region had just walked into a municipal courtroom. Even Judge Judy paused mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Whispers rippled through the room. Why would a general be here? What case is this? Is something wrong? But the general didn't speak. He didn't sit, he didn't even blink. He just stared coldly, sharply at the young man sitting at the defendant's table. A young man who suddenly lost all the arrogance he came in with. Something was wrong, very wrong, and no one, not even Judge Judy, knew the shocking truth behind his unexpected arrival. Not yet, asterisk. The moment the general appeared, the air in the courtroom shifted like a storm rolling in without warning. People tried not to stare, but no one could look away. His presence felt heavy, controlled, deliberate. Judge Judy lowered her gavel slowly, studying him with the sharp intuition of someone who had seen every kind of stunt imaginable. But even she knew this was different. Derek Hartwell felt it too. A tremor ran through him, barely visible, just a tightening of his jaw, a flicker in his eyes. Moments earlier, he had been lounging back in his chair, sunglasses on, jacket unzipped, smirking like he owned the world. Now his back stiffened, his posture rigid, his confidence cracking. He tried to look away, but the general's stare pinned him down like a nail to wood. No one moved. No one spoke. It felt like the entire room was holding its breath. Judge Judy finally broke the silence. "Sir, can this court help you?" Her tone was measured, polite, but beneath it lay a subtle warning. Her courtroom was not a place for theatrics. Not even for a man with 4 stars. The general didn't answer. Not yet. He took a few steps forward, boots striking the floor with precise, echoing thuds. Each step tightened the suspense like a noose. The bailiff instinctively shifted his stance, unsure if protocol required him to intervene or salute. Derek swallowed hard. His fingers twitched as he adjusted his jacket, trying to regain some of the swagger he'd walked in with, but it was gone. Completely gone. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. She looked from the general to Derek, then back. Something clicked in her mind, something about the way Derek froze, the way guilt washed over his face. She turned to the bailiff. Let the record reflect the presence of an unidentified military officer entering the courtroom. Then, facing the general again, she asked, "Sir, state your name and your purpose here." This time he spoke. "General Marcus Hartwell, United States Army." A ripple moved across the room like wind through tall grass. Even Judge Judy straightened subconsciously at the name. Derek's shoulders tightened. He didn't dare turn around. General Hartwell continued, his voice deep, calm, terrifyingly controlled. "My apologies for arriving unannounced, Your Honor. I was informed my son was in your courtroom. I'm here to observe." Judge Judy's expression didn't change, but there was a new edge in her tone. "Your son is indeed present. However, you'll remain silent unless called. This court runs on order, not rank." The general nodded once, accepting the reprimand with flawless discipline. He stepped aside and stood at the front row, not sitting, standing like a soldier awaiting deployment. Derek finally exhaled, but too late. Everyone saw the panic flash across his face. Judge Judy caught it too, and she didn't let it go. "Mr. Hartwell," she said firmly. "Stand." Derek rose slowly, his eyes fixed on the table, avoiding the general's line of sight entirely. "Remove your sunglasses," Judge Judy ordered. He hesitated just a moment, 1 second too long. Her eyebrow lifted, and that was enough. He yanked them off, hanging them from his collar. The judge studied him for a long, punishing pause. "Your father's presence will not influence these proceedings." Do you understand? Derek nodded, but Judge Judy's voice sharpened. Speak. Yes, Your Honor. The general didn't look at him. Not once. Judge Judy lifted the case file again, her tone turning colder by the second. You were charged with reckless driving, failure to stop at a military checkpoint, and unauthorized display of military credentials. Before we proceed further, I want to ensure you fully comprehend the seriousness of the allegations. Derek tried foolishly to fall back into old habits. Your Honor, I think this is all a bit exaggerated. Judge Judy slammed the file shut, the sound cracking like thunder. You will not minimize anything in my courtroom. A murmur spread through the gallery. Derek stood frozen. Judge Judy leaned forward. I've had defendants walk into this courtroom with entitlement. I've had people try to use money, connections, or influence to bend the law. But rarely have I seen someone carry themselves with such blatant disregard for authority, as you did the night of the incident. Derek opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a hand. You will listen first. The tension grew, thick and suffocating. Even the general seemed carved from stone. Judge Judy gestured to the prosecution. Present the body cam footage. The monitor flickered to life. The courtroom darkened slightly as the footage began. Derek's car, swerving across lanes, engine roaring like he was racing through empty highways instead of a residential military zone. Gasps echoed as the speed climbed 75, 80, 85 miles per hour. Then the checkpoint appeared. The MP's lights flared red and blue in the darkness. Derek didn't slow down. He didn't even pretend to consider stopping. A few jurors covered their mouths. Derek shifted uncomfortably, sweat beginning to form near his temple. The footage cut to Sergeant Vasquez approaching his window, calm, controlled, professional. Then Derek's face appeared on screen, arrogant, annoyed, disrespectful. Things he said, the threats, the insults. The entitlement filled the courtroom like poison. People turned in their seats, whispering in disbelief. Derek couldn't look at the screen. His eyes flicked once toward the general, but the general's face was carved from granite. Emotionless but deeply disappointed, when Derek pulled out the badge and held it up like a trophy, a collective gasp spread across the room. Even Judge Judy's throat tightened. The footage showed everything, every threat, every entitled demand, every word dripping with superiority. And then the moment came. Sergeant Vasquez, bracing herself. Derek stepping out of his car, invading her space, raising his voice. Judge Judy paused the video. The screen froze on Derek's face. Twisted with arrogance he could no longer deny. The judge spoke quietly. Mr. Hartwell, is that your voice? Your behavior? Derek's lips trembled. Yes, Your Honor. For the first time, his voice was small. Judge Judy didn't look satisfied. She looked disappointed, like a teacher who realized a student may not learn the lesson until life teaches it painfully. She took a slow breath. Your father's rank is irrelevant. Your behavior is what matters. And what I see here is a young man who believes power is something borrowed, something inherited, something that excuses. Her words cut deeper with every sentence. Derek's hands tightened into fists, but not in anger, this time. In fear. Judge Judy continued, her voice steady and cold. You thought the stars on your father's shoulders gave you permission. You thought authority was yours to claim. But privilege is not armor, Mr. Hartwell. And today, we will see exactly what happens when it shatters. Derek's breath hitched. The judge turned to the prosecutor. Call Sergeant Vasquez to the stand. The courtroom doors opened again, and the suspense deepened, because the truth was only beginning to surface. Asterisk. Sergeant Elena Vasquez walked in. Her posture impeccable, uniform pressed. Every medal and insignia gleaming under the harsh courtroom lights. She approached the witness stand with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced danger countless times and never wavered. Her eyes, however, betrayed the weight of the past week's hours spent replaying the incident, anticipating backlash for simply doing her duty. Judge Judy gestured toward her. Sergeant Vasquez, please raise your right hand and state the truth as you saw it on the night of March 8th. The sergeant complied, her voice steady yet commanding. I swear to tell the truth, Your Honor. Judge Judy nodded. Thank you. Now, walk us through that night. From the beginning. Sergeant Vasquez took a deep breath. I was performing my routine patrol near the main gates of Fort Bragg when I noticed a black sports car weaving erratically through the residential zone. I engaged my siren and lights to initiate a traffic stop. The driver, later identified as Derek Hartwell, did not comply. He accelerated, endangering both civilians and military personnel. Asterisk, the monitor behind her flickered, replaying the footage of the chase. Derek's face was illuminated by her flashlight, the arrogance and dismissiveness still evident in every sneer. He flinched as the video played, unable to hide the guilt that now gnawed at him. I approached the vehicle. Sergeant Vasquez continued, and requested license, registration, and military identification. Mr. Hartwell presented a set of credentials that did not belong to him, claiming them as his own by virtue of his father's rank. Derek swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. People leaned forward, eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. Asterisk, Judge Judy's gaze never wavered. And how did you respond to his threats, Sergeant? I documented everything, Your Honor. He attempted to intimidate me, warning of repercussions from his father if I issued a citation. Despite this, I performed my duties and issued the citation as required. A silence settled over the courtroom. Derek shifted uncomfortably, realizing his threats had been futile, recorded, and now publicly displayed. Judge Judy leaned forward. Sergeant, did he make any further threats after receiving the citation? Yes, Your Honor. He was aggressive, attempting to assert power through intimidation, claiming that his father's status could undo the consequences of his actions. He was fully aware of the law, but chose to disregard it in favor of his perceived privilege. Judge Judy's voice cut sharply through the tension. Mr. Hartwell, you see what happens when you attempt to weaponize your father's authority? This is reality. You are accountable for your actions, not your connections. Derek's face paled. His earlier bravado had crumbled entirely. He opened his mouth to speak, but Judge Judy raised a hand. Silencing him, the sergeant stepped down from the stand, her posture resolute. And Judge Judy turned her attention fully to Derek. Mr. Hartwell, your actions have endangered lives, disrespected the law, and attempted to manipulate justice through intimidation. Do you understand the gravity of this? Derek nodded, barely able to meet her eyes. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Judy's hand hovered over her prepared sentencing document. The court recognizes the privilege you attempted to exploit, but here, it is meaningless. Justice does not bow to rank or lineage. Therefore, you will face consequences proportionate to your offenses. She outlined the penalties: $27,500 in fines, 3 years of suspended driving privileges, and 150 hours of community service under the supervision of Sergeant Vasquez herself. Each word struck Derek like a hammer, the reality sinking in that no amount of influence or status could shield him from accountability. Judge Judy's voice carried the weight of finality. You walked in here thinking your father's stars made you untouchable. You leave knowing the truth. Privilege has limits and accountability is absolute. The gavel fell with a sharp, echoing crack. Derek slumped forward, defeated. General Hartwell, who had watched silently throughout, did not look at his son. His expression remained stoic, disappointment and pride interwoven in a way only a seasoned military leader could convey. Sergeant Vasquez straightened, vindicated. Judge Judy closed the file on Derek Hartwell, another entitled defendant humbled by the stark clarity of justice. Months later, Derek completed his community service. He walked quietly past Sergeant Vasquez, who signed off his paperwork without a word of praise or condemnation. The experience had changed him, whether out of genuine humility or mere survival instinct, only time would tell. One fact remained clear: respect cannot be borrowed, lessons cannot be bought, and some debts moral, legal, and personal must be repaid in full. Justice had spoken. And in Judge Judy's courtroom, it always did. Asterisk, the courtroom emptied slowly, whispers trailing like ghosts of the day's events. Derek's expensive boots made soft, uncertain sounds against the polished floor as the bailiff escorted him out. Every step seemed heavier than the last, the weight of his actions pressing down with relentless force. General Hartwell remained seated in the front row, rigid as a statue, refusing to acknowledge his son's retreating figure. There was no comforting word, no private conversation to soften the blow. This lesson was one Derek had to face alone. Outside the courtroom, reporters scrambled for statements, but Judge Judy waved them off. The gavel had spoken louder than any microphone. Some stories would be written, some rumors would swirl. But the truth, what had truly happened, was preserved in that courtroom, in the footage, and in the testimony of those who dared to stand for justice. 6 months later, Derek reported to his final community service shift. He arrived quietly, uniformed in work clothes rather than designer jackets or badges that weren't his. Sergeant Vasquez was already there, her presence calm but firm. She handed him a checklist of tasks: cleaning vehicles, organizing equipment, assisting with traffic safety programs. Every item was a reminder of responsibility, duty, and the stark reality that respect had to be earned, not inherited. Derek worked methodically, his movements deliberate and unhurried, eyes downcast. He said nothing, knowing that any attempt at excuse or argument would be pointless. For once, the loud voice, the threats, and the borrowed authority were meaningless. He scrubbed, arranged, swept, and cleaned, the silence of his labor echoing louder than any courtroom. Gavel, asterisk Sergeant Vasquez, signed off on his paperwork without ceremony. No words of praise, no acknowledgement of struggle, only the professional validation that the work had been completed correctly. Derek left the base that day a different man, or at least, the first glimpse of someone willing to understand accountability. At home, General Hartwell remained silent. Derek knew better than to expect a private conversation. That relationship, fractured by entitlement and arrogance, could only be rebuilt one honest action at a time. His father's disappointment was the heaviest punishment, heavier than any fine, restriction, or public humiliation. Some badges cannot be borrowed. Some lessons cannot be bought. Some prices must be paid in full, and Derek Hartwell had just begun to pay his. The sun set over Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the parking lot. In those shadows, Derek walked alone, boots dragging slightly, head bowed. The world he had taken for granted, filled with privilege and influence, had been stripped away. Only reality remained. Justice, as always, had prevailed. And in Judge Judy's courtroom, there was no compromise, no favoritism, no exceptions, only the law, accountability, and the truth. The echoes of the gavel lingered long after the doors closed, a reminder to all who believed power could shield them. One day it would not. And when that day came, justice would be waiting. The weeks that followed were quiet, almost painfully so. Derek returned to his life outside the courtroom, but everything felt smaller, constrained by the weight of consequences he could no longer avoid. Every glance at his father's uniform in the closet, every mention of the family name, now carried the memory of Judge Judy's piercing words taught at university. His peers noticed the change. The arrogance that once drew attention had dissipated, replaced by a tentative humility. Conversations that used to revolve around what he could get away with now centered on listening, observing, and reflecting. Derek still stumbled socially, old habits die hard, but the fear of losing more than money or privileges had reshaped his priorities. Occasionally, news reports mentioned the aftermath of the case. Headlines focused on Senator Hartley's corruption or the viral courtroom footage. Derek avoided them. He had seen the consequences firsthand and did not need public opinion to reinforce the lesson. What mattered was internal, understanding that respect, trust, and integrity cannot be borrowed, bought, or faked. He returned to the base each weekend for his community service shifts, working under Sergeant Vasquez. The initial tension between them had softened to professional discipline. Her presence, once a symbol of his failure, became a guidepost for accountability. Derek learned how to follow instructions without complaint, to recognize effort and expertise regardless of rank, and to respect authority without trying to manipulate it. Asterisk at home. General Hartwell still did not speak directly to him. Derek understood that rebuilding that relationship would take time, honesty, and consistent action. No plea, no flattery, no excuses could accelerate it. The silence from his father was a daily reminder of the consequences of arrogance, privilege, and misuse of influence. Months passed. The final shift of community service came, and Derek completed it without protest. Sergeant Vasquez signed off, a single nod acknowledging completion. It was neither praise nor censure, it was the neutral verification of a job done correctly. And to Derek, it felt like a small victory dot as he walked away from the base for the last time. Derek paused at the edge of the parking lot. The sunset painted the horizon in deep reds and golds, the kind of colors that make a person pause, reflect, and feel small in the face of the world. For the first time, he understood. Consequences are inescapable. Accountability is personal, and lessons learned under fire stay with you forever. Asterisk, he didn't speak, didn't look back. Some doors, once closed, remain closed until actions, not words, earn them open again. And some lessons, no matter how harsh, become the foundation for growth, character, and, eventually, redemption. Judge Judy's gavel, Derek realized, had done more than punish him. It had forced him to confront himself. And in the quiet that followed, with the wind brushing past, he felt the faintest stirrings of understanding, humility, and the beginning of true responsibility. Justice had its final word, and Derek Hartwell would carry it with him. Always, as the months turned into a full year, and Derek's life settled into a new rhythm, one dictated not by entitlement or inherited power, but by discipline, accountability, and self-reflection. Each day he woke earlier, prepared thoroughly, and faced tasks he once would have dismissed as beneath him. Every interaction with Sergeant Vasquez reminded him that respect must be earned, not demanded, and that privilege has limits that no wealth, connection, or family name can bypass. His friends noticed the difference too. Conversations that once revolved around parties, status, and influence became grounded in responsibility, decisions, and long-term consequences. Derek spoke less, listened more, and realized the value in observing before acting. It wasn't a sudden transformation, and he stumbled often, but for the first time, he felt the beginnings of personal growth. At home, General Hartwell remained a silent figure. Derek no longer sought approval through arrogance or mimicry. Instead, he acted responsibly in small ways, from mundane household tasks to volunteering quietly for military family events. It was as though each act was a brick in the long path toward redemption. A slow rebuilding of trust he had once shattered. The father and son rarely spoke, but in those moments when their eyes met across a room, there was a recognition not of approval, but of acknowledgement. General Hartwell saw the effort, the humility creeping into Derek's demeanor. And while it wasn't enough to erase the past, it was enough to plant the seed of a future reconciliation. Derek continued to share his story at military and civilian schools, as Judge Judy had mandated. He spoke openly about the dangers of entitlement, the illusions of inherited power, and the consequences of failing to respect authority. Initially, every word was awkward, every sentence a struggle. But over time, he grew comfortable, genuinely committed to delivering lessons to others so they would not repeat his mistakes. The courtroom footage played for audiences as a warning, a dramatic visual proof that arrogance and privilege are no shields against justice, and somewhere deep inside, Derek understood the magnitude of what he had learned. Justice is impartial, authority is earned, and integrity is non-negotiable. The lessons he had once mocked, resisted, or ignored had become a compass guiding him forward. Years later, Derek walked onto a military base, not as a spoiled son, not as an entitled observer, but as someone quietly committed to service, responsibility, and personal accountability. He still carried the memory of Judge Judy's courtroom, Sergeant Vasquez's unwavering professionalism, and his father's stern, unyielding presence. Every step he took was a reminder: some badges cannot be borrowed, some lessons cannot be bought, and some prices, though painful, must be paid in full. Justice had spoken. Accountability had been enforced, and Derek Hartwell, once untouchable in his own mind, had finally begun the slow, humbling journey to earn the respect he had once assumed was his by birthright. And in that journey, he discovered a truth more valuable than any rank, any inheritance. or any influence. True character can only be forged through challenge, consequence, and unwavering responsibility. The echoes of that courtroom, the crack of the gavel, and the stern eyes of Judge Judy remained with him forever, a silent, persistent reminder that no one, not even the son of a 4-star general, is above justice. The final months of Derek's transformation were quieter, almost invisible to those who didn't know the story. He completed his community service, fulfilled his speaking obligations, and carried out every task without complaint or excuse. Every morning, he arrived at Fort Bragg ready to work, ready to listen, and ready to be held accountable. Sergeant Vasquez observed him closely, noting the subtle shifts in posture, tone, and demeanor. He no longer flinched at instructions or questioned authority. He met it with respect, patience, and a growing sense of responsibility. His father, General Hartwell, remained a figure of silent judgment at home and at public events. Derek never sought shortcuts, never begged for approval, never tried to manipulate outcomes. Instead, he let his actions speak. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tension between father and son began to ease. Each small success, each completed task, and each honest effort was a quiet acknowledgement that Derek had begun to earn back trust, not just from his father, but from himself. Derek's speaking tours grew more confident, more sincere. He shared his story with military families, ROTC programs, and high school students, emphasizing accountability, humility, and the limits of privilege. Audiences were captivated, not just by the dramatic footage of his past misdeeds, but by the raw honesty of someone who had lived through the consequences of entitlement. He spoke openly about failure, the weight of mistakes, and the power of personal growth. And in every story, every lecture, he carried a piece of Judge Judy's words, the courtroom tension, and the stern lesson that no one, not wealth, not fame, not a 4-star general's son is above the law, asterisk, at home. The first real conversation with his father came unexpectedly. General Hartwell didn't praise him. He didn't offer comfort. He simply asked a single question: have you learned what it means to serve, rather than to be served? Derek answered honestly, without hesitation. Yes, sir. I understand now. It was a small exchange, yet monumental. No words could undo the past, but the acknowledgement marked the first real step toward rebuilding a fractured relationship. Derek had finally grasped the principle that would guide the rest of his life. Respect and trust must be earned through action, not assumed through heritage. As the sun set over Fort Bragg one last time on his final day of mandated service, Derek walked across the parade grounds, boots silent, shoulders squared, and head held a little higher, not with arrogance, but with the quiet dignity of someone who had faced himself and survived. He understood that some badges cannot be borrowed, some lessons cannot be bought, and some prices once paid leave a lasting imprint that shapes every decision thereafter. Justice had been served. Accountability had been enforced. And Derek Hartwell, once the untouchable son of a 4-star general, had finally begun to live a life measured not by privilege, but by character, integrity, and the unwavering recognition that some lessons once learned stay with you forever. The gavel may have fallen months ago, but its echo remained etched into his mind, guiding his steps and reminding him that in life, as in Judge Judy's courtroom, actions define a person, not names, rank, or connections. And with that, the story closed not with fanfare, not with applause, but with a hard-earned understanding that true justice and personal growth are inseparable. Asterisk. Case closed. Please subscribe our channel for new videos.